Juanita Bynum had spent weeks preparing for what was supposed to be the most important moment of her career, her appearance at a major Christian conference in Atlanta. Thousands of her supporters had gathered, eagerly awaiting the powerful message she was set to deliver. The worship music played, the crowd stood in anticipation, but something felt off. As the minutes ticked by, a quiet unease spread through the room. An hour passed, then two. Still, no word from Dr. Bynum. Her team finally took the stage, delivering a brief, vague announcement. Due to a personal emergency, Dr. Bynum will not be joining us tonight. We ask for your prayers and understanding. The air shifted from excitement to confusion. No one knew what had happened, but the gravity of the situation was palpable. Social media exploded with rumors, and her followers, desperate to understand, began praying without knowing what they were praying for. As the crowd slowly trickled out and the stage lights dimmed, Juanita sat alone in her hotel room, her mind racing. She hadn't spoken to anyone except her assistant, who too was left in the dark. It was then, at 2:13 a.m., that her phone rang. The name on the screen, her sister. The moment Juanita picked up, her heart sank. On the other end, she was met with frantic crying and screams, panic and confusion thick in the air. Between the sobs, her sister's words cut through the night. "Michael, he's been in a car accident. A speeding truck ran a red light and hit him head on." Juanita's heart stopped as she heard the news. Michael, her younger brother, the one person who had been her strength, was now fighting for his life. Emergency responders had to use the jaws of life to cut him out of the wreckage, and he was rushed to a hospital in critical condition, fighting for every breath. For Juanita, it wasn't just news, it was a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Her brother wasn't just family, he was her heart. Their relationship was more than just an emotional one. It had a spiritual quality. Alongside her, he had fasted, prayed, and supported her while others left. Something inside her crumbled when she heard that he was fighting for his life. On the hotel floor, she knelt down and started praying. It was an honest, fervent plea to God rather than the polished, public prayer that is frequently heard. She pleaded for more time, a miracle, and mercy. Everything changed with that call. Immediately, her priorities changed. The appearances, the schedule, and the conference. Now none of it mattered. She only wanted to be with her brother. Jonah's thoughts wandered to places she hadn't been to in years as she sat on the plane to Chicago. Michael was more than simply her younger sibling. Even when everyone else didn't believe in her, he was the only one who did. She recalled being a young pastor who was worn out and facing criticism. "You're doing what God called you to do," Michael would tell her over the phone late at night during those agonizing times. "Don't let anyone make you forget who you are." They had experienced a lot together as children. Their house was not flawless. There were difficult days, family conflicts, and times when it all seemed to come crashing down. Even yet, Michael had a unique ability to illuminate shadowy areas. Jonah would frequently claim that he exudes tranquility. He disliked being in the spotlight. Even though he wasn't a preacher, he possessed a calm strength that made her feel better than anyone else could. Michael remained at Jana's side during her most visible struggles, broken relationships, media attacks, and ministry disappointments. He didn't judge, didn't ask questions, and didn't pretend to be consoling. He simply stayed, listened, and prayed. He was the only person she could really cry in front of at times. He gave her the family-only name, Nita, and she felt secure each time he said it. One of her favorite memories is from 2015, just before she gave a speech at a large conference. She had felt anxious and spiritually depleted. "You don't need to be strong today. Just be you. God will do the rest." Michael texted her only minutes before she took the stage, and that one message moved her to tears and gave her the courage to deliver a sermon that transformed lives. Now, every memory felt like a thread tearing her heart apart as she hurried to the hospital, uncertain if he would still be alive when she got there. She had more in mind than simply seeing her brother. The person who had always stood up for her was the one she would battle for. Few people were aware of the silent struggles Joan Bynum had been going through behind the scenes, despite the fact that she appeared to the world to be strong, fervent in her worship, wild in her preaching, and fearless on stage. Juanita has been struggling for months. She had become physically, emotionally, and spiritually exhausted from long travels, consecutive ministry activities, and incessant demands from others. She encouraged others while grinning for the cameras. However, she frequently sat by herself in isolation, After the throng dispersed and the lights went down, battling bouts of silent melancholy and fatigue, she had suffered from gossip, rumors, and the burden of being misinterpreted. However, she never displayed any of it on stage. Despite the sorrow in her own heart, she felt that carrying the burdens of others was her destiny. She had been secretly mourning for a long time, not only for relationships she had lost, but also for the version of herself that had been shattered by years of stress. Michael, her brother, was aware of this. She was aware of his concern for her, as he frequently asked her, "You give out so much healing to others, but who's helping you heal?" She simply didn't want to cause him too much anxiety. She therefore frequently claimed to be all right. However, something inside of her broke after that late-night phone call regarding Michael's injury. She was no longer able to pretend. Her habits, her strength, and her composure all crumbled under the weight of sadness and dread. Jonah let herself feel everything for the first time in years. She shut down her calendar, cried publicly, and failed to respond ministry calls. Now, the lady who had inspired many wanted to be inspired herself. She understood that she had grown emotionally weary behind the acclaim and cheers. She no longer had the energy to wear the mask because her brother was fighting for his life. At that time, it wasn't about leadership, ministry, or appearances. It dealt with love, grief, and the painful truth that even the most resilient people may break. Days had passed since word of her brother's accident circulated among her close friends and family. Many were taken aback by Chan's decision to suspend everything, every planned speech, every meeting, and every sermon canceled. In an attempt to provide assistance, her ministry team suggested that she transmit a recorded message or that someone else preach in her place. It wasn't an easy choice though, and Junabu shook her head slowly saying, "Right now, I need to be a sister more than I need to be a preacher." This was the first time she had ever taken a break like this. She had a vast international ministry that was closely linked to her presence. However, something had changed within her. She came to see that genuine ministry begins at home with those who know you outside of the spotlight and stage. Michael was more than just a presence in her life. She couldn't continue as if nothing had occurred if he was in pain because he was a part of her mission. She shot a brief video from her living room a few days later. She spoke softly but passionately while seated in a plain chair, her eyes puffy and devoid of makeup. "I've always advised people to look after their souls," she remarked. "I must now heed my own counsel. I'm not sure what tomorrow will bring, but I do know that my brother is in the hospital. Please pray for me. I require time and rest." In a matter of hours, the video went viral. Thousands of individuals posted encouraging, loving, and scriptural comments. She was unlike anything her fans had ever seen. Broken, soft-spoken, and vulnerable. Despite her infirmity, many people claimed to have found her most powerful message to date. She had no intention of preaching. She had no intention of impressing. She was only being a human. She did this to remind the world that even religious leaders need to take a time to stop, take a deep breath, and simply be there for the people they care about. Then Joanna switched off her phone. She declined calls from the ministry or interviews and remained in the hospital with her family. This wasn't a break for her. It was a moment of sanctity, a chance to sit at her brother's bedside, pray as a sister in need of a miracle rather than as a prophet, and cling to hope. It was calm in the hospital corridors. However, there was a strong sense of prayer and optimism in Michael's room. Machines made mild beeps. Jonathan stayed by his side even while nurses arrived and went. Day and night, she sat beside her brother's bed, holding his hand, playing his favorite worship psalms on her phone, and reading scriptures out loud. His body was motionless, his eyes closed. He was in a coma, according to the doctors, and despite their best efforts, the crash had caused significant damage. The terrible silence of no change was followed by a rush of hope every morning. Joan prayed nonetheless. She talked to him as though he could hear her, bringing back memories of their early years, their mother's cooking, and the times they laughed together in hotel rooms following meetings. Jono rarely left the bedside, but her family took turns, and occasionally she would murmur, "Michael, it's nah. If you can hear me, just move your hand, please." She graciously accepted the hospital chaplain's invitation to join in prayer, although she prayed alone the most of the time. She leaned over the bed and let the tears fall quietly. The doctor arrived on the fourth day looking solemn. Their fears had been validated by the examinations. No cerebral activity was present. Michael's soul was fading, but his body was still alive. The family now had the final say on the matter. I've witnessed you save the dead. Please help me say farewell if this is your will. But I have preached your wonders. When the family gathered in the room later that night, Jonathan requested a brief minute of his privacy. She drew a chair next to him and took his hand, singing quietly while her voice wavered. It was the same hymn they hummed together as children, a straightforward praise tune they both cherished. Halfway through, her voice broke, but she continued. While she was holding his hand and resting her head against his chest, the monitors beat one last time before going silent. Michael was gone, and she didn't scream or collapse. Instead, she sat in silence, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Thank you for staying long enough to hear me sing." She repeated Song 23, her favorite part, and repeatedly told him, "I love you. I'll carry your heart with me always." A week later, the church was packed with pastors, singers, family, friends, and thousands of people who had been impacted by Geneva and her ministry over the years. That night, a piece of Juanita Bynum's soul broke forever, but she knew even in her grief that her earthly angel had returned home. A single framed photograph of Michael sat near the pulpit, his smile warm, calm, and familiar, looking back at everyone who entered. The funeral service was streamed live online, and within minutes, tens of thousands of people from all over the world joined. Michael's funeral was held in a large sanctuary in Chicago, the same city where his life had tragically ended. The stage was lined with white flowers. It was no longer merely a funeral, it had become a national moment of mourning, and Janina, sitting in the front row in a plain black dress, her eyes red from days of crying, didn't try to contain her feelings. Some were longtime members of Join's ministry, while others didn't know her personally but had heard about her loss and wanted to show support. The entire sanctuary was filled with love and grief, and she wept openly as the choir sang softly behind her. She didn't care who was watching, her pain was real, and for once she let the world see it. Some people sat in silence close to her, while others gently approached her to give hugs. The room fell silent as she approached the podium slowly, and then she took a deep breath before speaking. "I never imagined I'd have to bury my baby brother," she said. Her voice steady but gentle, but he wasn't a preacher. He taught me more about God's love than many who wear a collar. A pulpit wasn't necessary for him. A sermon was his life. She spoke of his humility, gentleness, and ability to quietly calm her storms. Regarding the most recent text message he sent her, she related a story, a brief message prior to his mishap. "I adore you, Nita, always proud of you." Even though she had seen this type of message 100 times before, it felt like a farewell present. Jonah's words reverberated throughout the sanctuary and beyond the living room as she concluded her eulogy. "I know I'm supposed to be strong. I know people look to me for strength. But today, I'm not Prophet Bynum. I'm just a sister, broken, holding on to God with everything I have left." People started crying, not only for Michael but also for their own silent losses, their own hidden griefs. Joyvik's candor somehow allowed them to feel again, and she concluded with a prayer, not a loud or dramatic one, but a gentle one, asking for healing, peace, and the strength to face tomorrow without the people we love. When she returned to her seat, the audience did not applaud. Instead, they stood in respectful silence, many of them wiping away their own tears. Weeks passed after Michael's funeral, but for Juanita Bynum, time seemed to move differently, and the world had returned to its routine. Joan Bynum was more than just a preacher that day. She was a sister in mourning, a woman of faith walking through fire, and a reminder to the world that even those who carry others sometimes need to be carried too. She didn't post on social media, she didn't answer the phone. She was grieving in private, letting her soul process what her heart could hardly bear. But grief has a way of bringing to light what really matters. Churches reopened, conferences resumed, and ministries continued. Something started to change inside Juanita in the stillness of her pain. One morning, while sitting by her window with Michael's Bible in her lap, she felt a calmness that she hadn't experienced in weeks. It wasn't loud or overwhelming, just a quiet sense that Michael's purpose had not ended with his death, but was still continuing through her. She started praying again, this time for clarity rather than crowds or platforms. A new purpose soon emerged, and Jonah began meeting with doctors, counselors, and grief specialists in order to honor her brother's memory by establishing a foundation in his name, focusing on critical injuries and auto accidents. She wanted the foundation to be more than just another charity. She wanted it to be real, personal, and healing. Just like Michael had been. The foundation's first event, a healing retreat for families who had lost someone, was held 3 months later. Jonoff didn't stand on stage to preach that day. Instead, she sat in small circles with mothers, sisters, and fathers, simply listening, crying with them, and sharing words from her own wounded heart. Gradually, she gathered a team of people who had endured hardship and come out stronger, not ministry celebrities. The public started to perceive a new Juanita, not less strong, but just more human, with softer words, a more sympathetic tone, and a more focused concentration. She frequently remarked, "The platform doesn't make you powerful. Your ministry is defined by what you carry in your heart." The answer was overwhelmingly positive. The pain she once believed would destroy her gave birth to a mission that was saving others. And even though she still missed Michael every day, his laughter, his calm voice, his texts, she knew his legacy was alive in every family the foundation helped. People from all over the country started reaching out, not just for sermons, but also for comfort, help, and hope. It was not the chapter she had anticipated writing, but it was the one she had been called to write. Months after the tragedy, Juanita Bynum eventually consented to do her first public interview. It was in a quiet room, with only her and the interviewer sitting across from each other, soft lighting, and a serene atmosphere. It was not the chapter she had anticipated, but it was the one she had been called to write. When the interviewer asked, "How did you survive this storm?" she appeared composed and more grounded than ever, but her eyes had a new depth, grief, and understanding that only comes from going through the fire. Taking a big breath, Juanita glanced down for a minute before saying, "I didn't use strength to get through it." She spoke as a woman who had experienced loss, heartbreak, and silent nights filled with tears, explaining how Michael's passing had stripped away all the noise and expectations and returned her to the simple truth. "I survived it by being broken, completely broken, and letting God rebuild me." She didn't speak as a celebrity or a preacher trying to impress. Presence is more important than performance, and love is more important than titles. Nothing compares to the silence of sitting next to my brother's bed and holding his hand as he slipped into eternity. That moment changed me, and I never want to return to who I was before. "I've been in rooms full of people shouting my name," she added. "I don't need big crowds to feel valuable. If I can sit with just one person in pain and help them breathe again, that's enough." She described her ministry as a mission rather than an empire, and she said, "To anyone who's broken, to anyone who feels like they can't get up again, listen to me." As the interview came to an end, she looked straight into the camera with tears in her eyes. "You are not destroyed by pain. It molds you. It makes you softer. It serves as a reminder of what really counts." She had preached for years, but suddenly her straightforward words, uttered from a place of intense grief and unadulterated faith, became her most potent message to date. "I am broken, but I'm still chosen, and so are you." Her remarks had an impact well beyond that interview. People cited her, shared video, and wrote her emails. When Juanita Bynum lost her brother, she discovered a deeper side of herself, and through her grief, she had unwittingly begun her most significant ministry to date. Her narrative did not finish with heartbreak. Rather, it continued with healing, transformation, and a greater awareness of God's mercy.